the summit's edge, Dr. Catherine Blackwood straightened her diplomatic uniform as the transport shuttle descended toward Kepler Station, the massive orbital facility gleaming like a jewel against the void of space. Beside her, Ranger lifted his massive head from where he'd been resting across two passenger seats, amber eyes alert to the subtle vibrations that meant docking procedures had begun. At nearly 4 feet at the shoulder and weighing close to 200 pounds, Ranger wasn't just large for a dire wolf. He was perfectly adapted for the kind of work Catherine did. Where normal wolves had been bred down over millennia, dire wolves had retained their prehistoric size and intelligence, making them ideal partners for complex interspecies communication work. "Easy, boy," Catherine murmured, running her fingers through the thick gray fur along his neck. Ranger's ears swiveled toward her, then forward again as his nostrils flared, processing scents that would tell him about the station's atmosphere, the number of species aboard, and the general stress levels of everyone within range. The shuttle's communication system crackled to life. "Princess Blackwood, this is Kepler Station Control. We have you on final approach. Be advised, the Thackeray delegation arrived early and requested to meet with you before the formal sessions begin." Catherine's stomach tightened. The Thackeray were notorious for their rigid adherence to protocol, and their early arrival wasn't a good sign. As the crown princess of the Terra Colonial Federation, she carried the weight of humanity's reputation in these negotiations. But more importantly, as the Federation's leading xenolinguistics expert, she was the only human who had successfully established meaningful communication with all 3 of the warring species. "Understood, Control," Dr. Blackwood acknowledging. "Will be ready for immediate transfer to the diplomatic quarters." Ranger's massive head turned toward her, and she caught the subtle shift in his posture that meant he'd detected her elevated stress. One of the remarkable things about dire wolves was their ability to read not just human emotional states, but to translate those readings across species lines. In her 3 years working with Ranger, Catherine had learned to interpret his behavioral cues as a secondary sensor array for alien emotional states that human technology often missed. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic thud that resonated through the shuttle's hull. Catherine gathered her diplomatic bag and checked her translator unit one final time. The device hummed quietly against her throat, a sophisticated piece of technology that interfaced directly with her vocal cords and auditory processing centers. Similar units had made interspecies communication possible, but Catherine had learned that true understanding required more than just translating words. "Time to work, Ranger." The dire wolf rose smoothly to his feet, his movement economical and purposeful. At full height, his shoulders came nearly to Catherine's waist, and his presence commanded immediate respect from anyone who encountered them. More than that, his ability to read micro-expressions, pheromone traces, and behavioral patterns across species had proven invaluable in negotiations, where a misunderstood gesture could mean the difference between peace and war. The shuttle's airlock cycled open, revealing the pristine corridors of Kepler Station. The facility had been specifically designed for multi-species diplomacy, with adjustable atmosphere zones, variable gravity fields, and architectural elements that avoided triggering territorial responses in any of the known sapient species. Ambassador Harrison Torres was waiting for them, his expression grim beneath graying hair. Catherine had worked with Harrison on 4 previous diplomatic missions, and she'd never seen him look this worried. "Catherine, thank God you're here," he said, falling into step beside her as they moved through the corridor. Ranger padded silently on her other side, his amber eyes scanning the environment with the focused attention of a predator assessing potential threats. "The situation's deteriorated since our last communication. The Thackeray are claiming the Zeridians violated the preliminary ceasefire by conducting military exercises near the disputed system. and the Corvani are threatening to withdraw from negotiations entirely if we can't guarantee their territorial sovereignty. Catherine felt Ranger's attention shift slightly, and she followed his gaze to see a Thakari diplomat approaching from a side corridor. The reptilian alien moved with the measured gait of his species, each step deliberate and calculated. His scales were a deep emerald green, indicating high rank within the Thakari hierarchy, and his throat pouch was inflated to approximately 60%, a sign of diplomatic formality rather than aggression. "Dr. Blackwood," the Thakari said, his translated voice carrying the precise tonal quality his species used for official communication. "I am first speaker Catherine. We must discuss the Zeridian provocations before the formal sessions begin." Catherine felt Ranger tense slightly beside her, and she placed her hand on his shoulder in their practiced signal for heightened awareness. The dire wolf's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, his ears canting forward in a way that meant he was detecting emotional undertones that the translation system might miss. "First speaker Catherine, it's an honor to meet you," Catherine replied, allowing her own translator to modulate her voice into the formal diplomatic register the Thakari preferred. "I understand your concerns about the recent military exercises. Perhaps we could discuss the specific details that have caused alarm." Catherine's throat pouch deflated slightly, a good sign, but Ranger's attention remained fixed on the alien diplomat. Catherine had learned to trust her partner's instincts. Dire wolves could detect pheromone traces and microexpressions that revealed emotional states, even when conscious behavior remained controlled. The Zeridians conducted fleet maneuvers within 3 light days of the Helios system, Catherine continued. Their formations were clearly offensive in nature, despite their claims of routine training exercises. Catherine noticed Ranger's ear position shift, and she filed that observation away. In her experience, when aliens used absolute terms like clearly while discussing ambiguous situations, there were usually underlying concerns they weren't expressing directly. "I see," Catherine said carefully. "When you say the formations were offensive in nature, could you describe the specific tactical arrangements that led to that assessment?" As Catherine began describing the fleet movements, Catherine watched Ranger's reactions. The dire wolf's ability to read nonverbal communication had proven crucial in previous negotiations, often alerting her to hidden anxieties or unspoken motivations that colored the discussions. They made their way through the station's diplomatic quarter, passing environmental zones calibrated for different species requirements. The Zeridian section maintained a higher humidity level and slightly increased atmospheric pressure, while the Corvani area featured the lower gravity and specialized lighting their crystalline physiology required. "The formal sessions begin in 6 hours," Ambassador Torres said as they reached Catherine's quarters. "All 3 delegations will be present, along with representatives from the Galactic Mediation Council. This is our best chance to prevent this conflict from escalating into full-scale war." Catherine nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility. The 3 species had been engaged in escalating territorial disputes for over 2 years, and recent incidents had brought them to the brink of warfare that could destabilize the entire sector. Humanity's role as mediator was largely due to their unique approach to interspecies communication, an approach that often relied on insights that formal diplomatic protocols missed. "I'll need to review the latest intelligence reports and spend some time with the translation matrices," Catherine said. "Ranger and I should also do a walkthrough of the conference chamber to familiarize ourselves with the environment." As if summoned by his name, Ranger's attention sharpened, and his nostrils flared as he processed scents from the corridor beyond. Catherine had learned to read his behavioral patterns like a secondary sensor array, and something had clearly caught his attention. "What is it, boy?" she asked quietly. The dire wolf's gaze fixed on the entrance to the Corvani environmental zone, and Catherine noticed the almost imperceptible tension in his shoulders that indicated he was detecting elevated stress pheromones. The Corvani were crystalline beings, whose emotions manifested through subtle changes in their bioluminescent patterns. But they also released specific chemical markers that most humans couldn't detect. There might be more urgent concerns than we realized, Catherine said to Tors. Rangers picking up stress indicators from the Corvani section that suggest something beyond normal pre-negotiation anxiety. Tors frowned. The Corvani delegation has been unusually secretive since they arrived. Their requests for environmental modifications were more extensive than we expected, and they've declined most informal interactions with the other delegations. Catherine felt a familiar surge of focus that came when a complex communication puzzle began revealing its underlying patterns. Her work as a xenolinguistics expert had taught her that successful interspecies diplomacy required understanding not just what aliens said, but what they couldn't or wouldn't express directly. I think we need to start with individual meetings before the formal sessions, Catherine said. If we can identify the specific concerns each delegation is carrying, we might be able to address the underlying issues instead of just managing the surface conflicts. As they entered her quarters, Catherine began mentally preparing for what would likely be the most challenging diplomatic mission of her career. The station's walls displayed a holographic view of local space, showing the positions of the 3 fleets that had gathered at the edge of the system, close enough to respond to any developments, but far enough away to avoid triggering immediate hostilities. Ranger settled onto the specially reinforced furniture designed to accommodate his size, but his alertness never diminished. Catherine had learned that dire wolves possessed an almost supernatural ability to sense tension and conflict, making them ideal partners for high-stakes diplomatic work. The next few hours would determine whether 3 civilizations found a path to peace, or whether the delicate balance of power in this sector collapsed into warfare that could last for generations. 3 hours before the formal negotiations were scheduled to begin, Catherine was running final diagnostics on her translation equipment when Ranger suddenly rose to his feet, every muscle in his powerful frame going rigid with alertness. "What is it?" Catherine asked, immediately setting down her diagnostic tablet. In the 18 months they'd been working together, she'd learned to trust Ranger's instincts completely. The dire wolf's enhanced senses often detected problems before any human technology registered anomalies. Ranger's amber eyes were fixed on the communication console, his ears pinned forward in the focused attention posture that meant he was processing information from multiple sensory channels. A low rumble built in his chest, not quite a growl, but the deep harmonic vibration that dire wolves used to communicate complex emotional states to their pack members. Catherine followed his gaze to the console and felt her stomach drop. The status indicators for the Universal Translation Network were showing intermittent yellow warnings, flickering between normal operation and error states. She activated her personal communicator. "Tors, we have a potential problem with the translation systems. I'm seeing instability in the primary network." "Confirmed," came Tors' tense voice. "Engineering is reporting cascade failures in the quantum coherence matrices. They're trying to isolate the problem, but we may need to delay the session." Catherine closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the situation. Delaying the negotiations would be interpreted as weakness by the Thakari, incompetence by the Zeridians, and a potential sign of human duplicity by the Corvani. Each species had traveled across vast distances to attend these talks, and their military fleets were positioned within striking distance of each other. "How long until they can restore full functionality?" Catherine asked. "Unknown. Could be hours, could be days." The quantum matrices are integrated too deeply into the station's systems for quick repairs. Ranger's posture shifted, and Catherine felt him press against her leg, his signal that he was detecting elevated stress throughout the station. His enhanced senses could pick up pheromone traces and emotional markers from dozens of species, creating a complex map of psychological states that no human technology could replicate. "I need to speak with the delegations immediately," Catherine said. "If we're going to proceed without full translation support, everyone needs to understand the risks and limitations." 20 minutes later, Catherine found herself in the central conference chamber with Ranger at her side, facing 3 alien delegations whose body language spoke volumes about their emotional states, even without technological assistance. First speaker Catherine's throat pouch was inflated to maximum size, indicating extreme formal displeasure. His scales had darkened to a deep forest green that suggested barely controlled aggression, and his claws were partially extended, a Thackeray threat display that was probably unconscious, but no less significant. The Zeridian delegation, led by Warsinger Nexus, showed their distress through the rapid flutter of their wing membranes and the high-pitched harmonic undertones that colored their vocalizations. Zeridians communicated as much through sound frequency as through words, and the current tonal patterns suggested confusion mixed with suspicion. Most concerning were the Corvani. Representative Quill's crystalline body was cycling through deep purple and red luminescence patterns, colors that Catherine had learned indicated severe anxiety bordering on panic. The other 2 Corvani delegates were maintaining perfect stillness, which for their species was equivalent to a defensive posture. "The translation systems are experiencing technical difficulties," Catherine announced, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "However, I believe we can proceed with modified communication protocols." Catherine's throat pouch deflated slightly, but his scales remained dark. "Dr. Blackwood, the precision of language is essential for diplomatic accords. Without accurate translation, we risk dangerous misunderstandings." "The Warsinger agrees with the first speaker," Nexus added, her wing membranes settling into a more stable position. "Zeridian honor requires absolute clarity in all negotiations." Representative Quill's luminescence patterns shifted to deeper red. "The Corvani Collective cannot accept agreements based on incomplete understanding. Our crystalline nature requires perfect harmonic resonance in all communications." Catherine felt Ranger's attention shift between the 3 delegations, his enhanced senses processing the complex web of emotional states and chemical markers that filled the chamber. She had learned to read his behavioral cues as a secondary source of information about alien psychology. And right now, he was telling her that all 3 species were more afraid than angry. "I understand your concerns," Catherine said, moving to the center of the chamber. "But I'd like to propose an alternative approach. What if we focus on understanding the deeper concerns that brought us here, rather than trying to craft precise legal language?" Ranger padded forward to stand beside her, his massive presence commanding attention from all 3 delegations. Catherine had noticed that most species found dire wolves fascinating. Their size and predatory grace triggered recognition patterns that transcended species boundaries. The Thackeray delegation fears that any agreement reached under these conditions will lack the binding authority necessary to prevent future violations. Catherine continued, watching Catherine's reaction. "The Zeridians are concerned that imprecise language might compromise their honor in ways they cannot anticipate. And the Corvani worry that harmonic resonance, the fundamental basis of their communication, cannot be achieved without perfect technological mediation." All 3 delegations showed signs of surprise at the accuracy of her assessments. Catherine had learned to read microexpressions and behavioral patterns across multiple species. But Ranger's enhanced senses provided crucial additional information about emotional states that conscious behavior often concealed. However, Catherine said, I believe these concerns share a common foundation. Each of your species values integrity and genuine understanding. The question is whether we can achieve that understanding through direct communication rather than technological mediation. Quill's luminescence patterns shifted to a lighter purple. How would the human propose to achieve harmonic resonance without quantum translation matrices? Catherine smiled, feeling Ranger's calm presence beside her. By acknowledging that perfect translation might be less important than honest communication. Ranger here doesn't speak any of our languages, but he understands emotional truth across species lines. Sometimes the most important messages aren't carried by words. She gestured to her dire wolf companion. Watch his reaction when each of you speaks about your core concerns. His enhanced senses can detect emotional authenticity in ways that our technology often misses. Catherine's throat pouch inflated with what Catherine recognized as curiosity rather than displeasure. The human suggests that her animal companion can provide insights into our psychological states. Not just insights, Catherine replied. Ranger can detect when someone is speaking from genuine conviction versus political necessity. He can sense fear, hope, anger, and honesty through pheromone traces and microexpressions that cross species boundaries. Nexus's wing membranes fluttered with interest. This is an unusual approach to diplomatic protocol. Unusual, yes, Catherine agreed. But consider this. Your species have been fighting for 2 years based on translated communications that may have lost crucial emotional context. What if some of your conflicts stem from misunderstandings that perfect translation technology actually made worse? Ranger's ears swiveled forward, and Catherine felt his attention focus on Quill. The Corvani representative's luminescence had shifted to a pale blue that Catherine didn't recognize from her training materials. Representative Quill, Catherine said carefully, Ranger is detecting something unusual in your emotional patterns. Would you be willing to share what you're feeling right now? The crystalline being's luminescence flickered through several rapid color changes before settling on a pale yellow. The Corvani Collective has not revealed the full scope of our concerns in these negotiations. A moment of profound silence filled the chamber. Catherine felt Ranger's subtle tension, indicating that the dire wolf was detecting elevated stress from all 3 delegations. Would you be willing to share those concerns now? Catherine asked gently. Quill's body cycled through what Catherine now realized was the Corvani equivalent of deep breathing. The disputed territories contain resonance phenomena that are essential to Corvani reproduction. Without access to these harmonic fields, our species faces extinction within 3 generations. The admission hit the chamber like a shock wave. Suddenly, the Corvani's desperate insistence on territorial rights made perfect sense, as did their reluctance to engage in casual diplomatic interactions that might reveal their vulnerability. Catherine's scales shifted to a lighter green. The Thakari delegation was not informed of this biological imperative, nor were the Zeridians, Nexus added, her wing membranes settling into a pattern Catherine recognized as deep contemplation. Catherine felt a surge of hope. This was exactly the kind of breakthrough that became possible when species moved beyond formal diplomatic language to genuine emotional truth. Ranger detected the depth of your concern from the moment we arrived, Catherine said to Quill. Your luminescence, patterns, and chemical markers indicated existential fear, not just territorial ambition. She turned to address all 3 delegations. What other crucial information have we been missing? Because we've been focused on precise translation rather than honest communication. The revelation about Corvani reproductive needs transformed the entire dynamic in the conference chamber. Catherine watched as Ranger's posture shifted from alert surveillance to what she'd learned to recognize as his mediation mode. A calm, attentive stance that seemed to encourage honesty from all species. First speaker Catherine was the first to respond, his throat pouch deflating to normal size as his scales lightened to a more neutral green. If the Corvani require access to these resonance phenomena for species survival, the Thakari Empire must reconsider our territorial claims. Catherine felt Ranger's attention sharpen, and she followed his gaze to see that Catherine's claws had retracted completely, a sign of genuine sincerity that the Thakari diplomat might not even be aware he was displaying. However, Catherine continued, the Thakari have strategic concerns that extend beyond this system. Our intelligence suggests Zeridian fleet movements indicate preparation for larger territorial expansion. Warsinger Nexus's wing membranes snapped to full extension, a Zeridian expression of indignation. The Zeridian Commonwealth accuses no one of territorial expansion. Our fleet positions are defensive responses to Thakari militarization. Catherine noticed Ranger's ears angle toward Nexus, and she caught the subtle head tilt that meant he was detecting mixed emotional signals. In her experience working with Zeridians, that usually meant there was truth in what they were saying, but also information they weren't sharing. Warsinger Nexus, Catherine said carefully. Ranger is indicating that your emotional patterns suggest both honesty and, perhaps, some additional concerns you haven't mentioned. Nexus's wing membranes fluttered in what Catherine had learned was the Zeridian equivalent of nervous laughter. The human's animal companion possesses remarkable perceptual abilities. The Zeridian leader moved to one of the environmental stations, designed to accommodate her species' preference for elevated positions. The Zeridian Commonwealth faces internal pressures that may be influencing our external policies. Representative Quill's luminescence shifted to warm amber that Catherine interpreted as empathetic interest. What nature of internal pressures? Resource depletion, Nexus admitted, her wing membranes drooping slightly. Our primary mining worlds are approaching exhaustion. The Commonwealth requires new sources of rare minerals to maintain our technological infrastructure. Catherine felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to align. And the disputed territories contain mineral deposits that would address those needs. Affirmative, Nexus said. However, Zeridian honor prevents us from stating resource acquisition as a motivation for territorial claims. We must frame our actions in terms of defensive necessity. Catherine's throat pouch inflated with what Catherine recognized as understanding rather than displeasure. The Thakari Empire faces similar resource constraints. Our population growth has exceeded the carrying capacity of our core worlds. Catherine looked down at Ranger, whose calm attention was moving between all three delegations, with the focused awareness of a predator monitoring multiple potential threats. But instead of aggression, she sensed something different in his posture, the patient attention of a pack leader managing complex social dynamics. So we have three species, Catherine said slowly, each facing existential pressures that they haven't been able to discuss openly because of diplomatic protocol and cultural constraints. She moved to the center of the chamber, with Ranger padding silently beside her. The Corvani need access to harmonic resonance fields for reproduction. The Zeridians require mineral resources to maintain their technological civilization. The Thakari need territory for population expansion. Accurate summary, Quill said, their luminescence cycling through several colors that Catherine interpreted as thoughtful consideration. And all three needs overlap in the same star system, Catherine continued, which explains why 2 years of formal negotiations haven't produced any progress. Ranger's attention focused on the holographic display that showed the disputed Helios system, and Catherine followed his gaze. The dire wolf's enhanced senses often picked up details that human perception missed, and right now, he seemed to be studying the display with unusual intensity. "Ranger, what are you seeing?" Catherine asked. The massive wolf approached the holographic projector and sat directly in front of it, his amber eyes tracking the orbital patterns of the system's planets and moons. Catherine had learned to trust these moments when Ranger's attention became laser-focused on specific details. She studied the display more carefully, trying to see what had caught her partner's attention. The Helios system contained 7 planets, 3 gas giants with extensive moon systems, and an asteroid belt rich in rare minerals. The harmonic resonance phenomena that the Corvani required were generated by the gravitational interactions between the inner planets and the largest gas giant. "The spatial distribution," Catherine said suddenly. "Ranger, you're seeing the spatial distribution, aren't you?" She turned to address the 3 delegations. "What if the problem isn't that your needs are incompatible, but that we've been thinking about them as mutually exclusive?" Catherine's scales shifted to a curious pale green. "Elaborate." Catherine moved to the holographic controls, expanding the display to show more detail. "The Corvani need access to the resonance phenomena, which are generated by planetary gravitation. The Zeridians need the mineral resources from the asteroid belt and outer planets. The Thakari need habitable worlds for population expansion." She highlighted different regions of the system, but these requirements don't actually overlap geographically. The harmonic fields are generated by gravitational interactions that wouldn't be affected by mining operations in the outer system or colonization of the habitable worlds. Nexus's wing membranes snapped to attention. The Zeridian Commonwealth could conduct mining operations without interfering with the gravitational phenomena. The Thakari could establish colonies on the habitable worlds without disrupting either the resonance fields or the mining operations. Catherine added, his throat pouch deflating with what Catherine recognized as relief. Representative Quill's luminescence brightened to a warm gold. The Corvani Collective could access the harmonic fields while sharing the system with other species. Catherine felt Ranger's calm satisfaction as the dire wolf returned to her side. His enhanced senses had picked up the shift in emotional atmosphere that accompanied genuine breakthrough moments. The relief and hope that came when seemingly impossible problems revealed workable solutions. "But this raises a new question," Catherine said. "Why didn't your species identify this possibility during 2 years of formal negotiations?" The answer came from all 3 delegations almost simultaneously, spoken in overlapping translations that created a moment of genuine understanding despite the malfunctioning technology. "Because we could not reveal our true vulnerabilities through formal diplomatic channels," Catherine said. "Because admitting resource depletion would compromise our bargaining position," Nexus added. "Because exposing our reproductive requirements would invite exploitation," Quill concluded. Catherine nodded, understanding the fundamental problem that had made resolution impossible. Formal diplomacy requires maintaining positions of strength, even when collaboration would serve everyone's interests better. Ranger's attention was now focused on the chamber's main entrance, and Catherine turned to see Ambassador Tors approaching with a team of engineering specialists. The expression on Tors' face suggested that the news about the translation systems wasn't good. "Dr. Blackwood," Tors said as he entered the chamber, "engineering reports that the translation matrix failure is more extensive than initially believed. Full restoration could take several days." Catherine felt a moment of panic. Several days of delay could allow the military tensions in the system to escalate beyond diplomatic control. But then she looked at the 3 alien delegations and realized that something fundamental had changed in the past hour. "Ambassador Tors," she said carefully, "I think we might be able to proceed without waiting for full translation system restoration." Tors' expression showed his skepticism, But Catherine continued. These delegations have identified the core issues underlying their conflict, and I believe we can draft a preliminary framework for shared system access. She gestured to include all 3 species. Would your delegations be willing to continue negotiations using simplified communication protocols while we work out the technical details? The responses came without hesitation. The Thakari Empire agrees. The Zeridian Commonwealth accepts. The Corvani collective consents. Catherine felt Ranger's calm satisfaction, and she realized that the dire wolf had understood something about interspecies communication that even she was still learning. Sometimes the most important breakthroughs happened when formal protocols failed and genuine understanding became possible. 6 hours later, Catherine found herself facilitating the most unconventional diplomatic session of her career. The main conference chamber had been reconfigured to accommodate the environmental needs of all 3 species. But more importantly, the entire approach to communication had been transformed. Instead of formal position statements delivered through precise technological translation, the negotiations had evolved into something more like a collaborative, problem-solving session. Ranger lay in the center of the chamber, his massive form serving as both a calming presence and a living sensor array for detecting emotional authenticity. The preliminary resource allocation framework appears workable. First speaker Catherine said, his throat pouch inflated to a size that Catherine had learned indicated careful consideration rather than displeasure. However, the Thakari Empire requires assurance that Corvani harmonic activities will not interfere with colonial development. Representative Quill's luminescence shifted through several colors, before settling on a pale blue that Catherine interpreted as thoughtful analysis. Corvani reproductive harmonics operate on frequencies that do not interact with most technological systems. However, we can provide detailed spectral data to ensure compatibility. Warsinger nexuses, wing membranes fluttered with what Catherine recognized as genuine interest. Zeridian mining operations utilize sonic extraction methods that could potentially enhance harmonic resonance if properly calibrated. Catherine felt Ranger's attention sharpen, and she noticed that the dire wolf was focusing on Nexus with the kind of intense interest that usually meant he was detecting something significant. In her experience, when Ranger showed this level of attention to a specific individual, it usually meant they were experiencing an emotional breakthrough. Warsinger Nexus, Catherine said carefully. Are you suggesting that Zeridian mining operations might actually benefit Corvani reproductive requirements? Nexus's wing membranes snapped to full extension, a display that Catherine had initially interpreted as aggression, but had learned was actually how Zeridians expressed excitement about new possibilities. Affirmative, Nexus said, her translated voice carrying harmonic undertones that suggested genuine enthusiasm. Zeridian sonic mining creates sympathetic resonance patterns that could amplify natural harmonic phenomena. Representative Quill's entire body brightened to a brilliant gold that Catherine had never seen before. This possibility was not considered in our initial analysis. Enhanced harmonic resonance would allow Corvani reproduction rates to exceed baseline projections. Catherine felt a surge of excitement as the implications became clear. So instead of competing for access to the same resources, your species might actually benefit from coordinated activities. Catherine's scales shifted to the lightest green Catherine had seen from any Thakari, indicating what she was beginning to recognize as profound satisfaction. The Thakari Empire could provide colonial infrastructure that supports both Zeridian mining operations and Corvani harmonic installations. The breakthrough was so sudden and complete that Catherine almost couldn't believe it. She looked down at Ranger, whose calm attention was now moving between all 3 delegations with what she recognized as his pack harmony posture. the relaxed alertness of a wolf who sensed that his pack members were working together effectively. "I think," Catherine said slowly, "that we've just discovered something that 2 years of formal negotiations missed entirely." Ambassador Tors, who had been observing from the chamber's periphery, approached with an expression of amazement. "Dr. Blackwood, are you saying that the 3 species have found a way to share the disputed system in a manner that benefits everyone?" "Not just share," Catherine replied. "They've identified synergistic opportunities that could make their combined presence more beneficial than any single species occupation." She turned to address the 3 delegations. "This is remarkable progress, but I want to make sure we're not missing anything crucial. Are there any remaining concerns that haven't been addressed?" Ranger's ears swiveled toward the Corvani delegation, and Catherine noticed that Representative Quill's luminescence had dimmed slightly. The dire wolf's enhanced senses were detecting something that visual observation alone might miss. "Representative Quill," Catherine said gently, "Ranger is indicating that you might have additional concerns. Would you be willing to share them?" The crystalline being's luminescence cycled through several rapid color changes before settling on a deep purple that Catherine had learned indicated anxiety. "The Corvani Collective has one remaining requirement that may complicate the proposed arrangements." A moment of tension filled the chamber as all 3 delegations focused on Quill. Catherine felt Ranger's attention intensify, his enhanced senses processing the complex web of emotional reactions that her words had triggered. "Our reproductive cycles require not only harmonic resonance, but also direct exposure to specific stellar radiation patterns," Quill continued. "The Helios system's primary star generates the appropriate wavelengths, but only during certain orbital configurations." Catherine felt her heart sink as she realized the implications. "You're saying that the Corvani need exclusive access to the system during specific time periods?" "Affirmative," Quill said, their luminescence dimming further. "For approximately 60 standard days every 18 local months, no other activities can occur in the inner system without disrupting the reproductive harmonics." The chamber fell silent as the 3 delegations processed this information. Catherine watched as the expressions of hope and cooperation that had been building over the past hours began to fade, replaced by the familiar tensions of competing interests. But then Ranger did something unexpected. The massive dire wolf rose to his feet and moved directly to Representative Quill, settling beside the crystalline being with calm, patient attention. His posture radiated the kind of protective awareness that pack wolves showed toward vulnerable pack members. "Ranger is indicating that he doesn't perceive this as a conflict," Catherine said, studying her partner's behavior. "In wolf pack dynamics, different members have different needs at different times, and the pack adapts to support each member when necessary." She looked around the chamber at the 3 delegations. "What if we think about this the way Ranger does? Instead of seeing the Corvani reproductive requirements as an obstacle, what if we consider them as a natural cycle that the entire system could accommodate?" Catherine's throat pouch inflated with curiosity. "Elaborate." "The Corvani need exclusive access for 60 days every 18 months, Catherine said. "That's less than 12% of total time. What could the Thakari and Zeridians accomplish during the remaining 88% of each cycle?" Nexus's wing membranes fluttered with growing interest. Zeridian mining operations could be scheduled to coincide with periods when harmonic interference is not a concern. Thakari colonial development could proceed on accelerated timelines during non-reproductive periods, Catherine added, his scales lightening as he spoke. The concentrated effort might actually be more efficient than continuous low-level activity. Representative Quill's luminescence brightened to amber. And during reproductive periods, both species could conduct maintenance and planning activities that do not require presence in the inner system. Catherine felt Ranger's satisfaction as the dire wolf returned to his position in the center of the chamber. His enhanced senses had detected the shift back toward cooperation and mutual problem-solving, and his calm presence seemed to encourage continued honest communication. "There's something else to consider," Catherine said, as new possibilities occurred to her. The Corvani reproductive periods could become opportunities for cultural exchange and joint planning. Instead of treating them as exclusions, they could be times when all three species work together on long-term coordination. The idea seemed to resonate with all three delegations. Catherine watched as body language, luminescence patterns, and harmonic undertones all shifted toward what she was learning to recognize as genuine enthusiasm for collaborative possibilities. "Dr. Blackwood," Torres said quietly, approaching from the chamber's edge, "engineering reports that they've managed to restore partial translation capability. Should I have them continue working toward full restoration?" Catherine looked around the chamber at the three alien delegations, then down at Ranger, whose calm attention suggested that the emotional atmosphere had stabilized at a level that supported continued productive communication. "Ambassador Torres," she said with a smile, "I think we might have discovered something more effective than perfect translation technology." She turned to address the three delegations. "Would you be willing to draft a preliminary agreement using our current communication methods? We can refine the technical language later, but I believe we've achieved something more important than precise translation." The responses came in overlapping harmony that needed no technological mediation. The Thakari Empire agrees. The Zeridian Commonwealth accepts. The Corvani collective consents. Catherine felt Ranger's deep satisfaction, and she realized that her dire wolf partner had taught her something profound about the nature of interspecies communication. Sometimes the most important understanding happened not through perfect translation of words, but through honest recognition of genuine needs and authentic emotional truth. The war that had seemed inevitable just hours earlier was being replaced by the foundation for unprecedented cooperation between three species who had learned that their differences could become strengths when approached with trust and creativity. 3 months after the Helios Accords were signed, Catherine stood on the observation deck of Kepler Station, watching as the first joint Thakari-Zeridian Corvani installations came online in the Helios system. Beside her, Ranger maintained his calm vigilance, amber eyes tracking the movement of ships from 3 different species working together in patterns that would have been impossible to imagine before their breakthrough. The preliminary agreement they had drafted during the translation system failure had evolved into something far more comprehensive than anyone had expected. The Helios system had become a model for multi-species cooperation, with each species contributing their unique capabilities to create something greater than any single civilization could achieve alone. Ambassador Torres approached from the station's command center, carrying a data tablet that displayed the latest reports from the system. "Dr. Blackwood, the quarterly efficiency reports are remarkable. Combined operations are exceeding all projections for resource extraction, colonial development, and reproductive success rates." Catherine smiled as she reviewed the data. It turns out that when species can communicate their genuine needs, instead of maintaining diplomatic facades, they discover opportunities that formal negotiations never reveal. Ranger's attention shifted toward the station's diplomatic quarter, and Catherine followed his gaze to see representatives from 6 additional species who had requested mediation services based on the success of the Helios negotiations. Word had spread through the galactic community about the unconventional communication methods that had resolved what everyone had considered an intractable conflict. "The demand for your diplomatic services has increased exponentially," Torres noted. "The Galactic Mediation Council has formally requested that you develop a training program for other diplomatic teams." Catherine reached down to rest her hand on Ranger's massive shoulder, feeling the calm strength that her dire wolf partner brought to every interaction. "I think the key insight isn't really about specific techniques. It's about recognizing that honest communication requires trust, and trust requires vulnerability." She gestured toward the holographic display showing the Helios system. Every species in that system revealed their deepest fears and most critical needs. The Corvani admitted they faced extinction without access to harmonic resonance. The Zeridians acknowledged resource depletion that threatened their technological civilization. The Thakari revealed population pressures that could have driven them to aggressive expansion. Ranger's ears swiveled toward Catherine, and she caught the subtle shift in his posture that meant he was processing complex emotional information. Even after months of working together, his enhanced ability to read emotional truth across species lines continued to provide insights that formal diplomatic training never anticipated. But the real breakthrough, Catherine continued, came when they realized that their vulnerabilities could become mutual strengths when approached with genuine cooperation instead of competitive positioning. A soft chime from the station's communication system announced the arrival of a new delegation, and Catherine turned to see first speaker Keithrin approaching with what appeared to be several younger Thakari diplomats. His throat pouch was inflated to the moderate size that Catherine had learned indicated formal but friendly interaction. "Dr. Blackwood," Keithrin said, his scales showing the light green of contentment and respect. "The Thakari Empire requests permission to observe your next diplomatic mission. Our young diplomats require instruction in the communication methods that achieved such unprecedented success." Catherine felt Ranger's attention focus on the group of young Thakari, and she noticed his posture shift to what she'd learned to recognize as his teaching mode. A calm, patient awareness that encouraged learning and honest interaction. "First speaker Keithrin, I'd be honored to include Thakari observers," Catherine replied. "But I should mention that our methods don't really follow traditional diplomatic protocols." Keithrin's throat pouch deflated slightly with what Catherine interpreted as amusement. "Dr. Blackwood, traditional diplomatic protocols failed to resolve our conflict for 2 years. Your non-traditional methods achieved breakthrough in 6 hours." One of the younger Thakari stepped forward, his scales showing the bright green of youth and curiosity. "Dr. Blackwood, is it true that your animal companion can detect deception across species lines?" Catherine looked down at Ranger, whose calm attention was now focused on the young diplomat. "Not exactly deception," she said carefully. "Ranger can detect when someone is speaking from genuine conviction versus political necessity. He senses emotional authenticity through pheromone traces and behavioral patterns that cross species boundaries." She paused, watching as Ranger's ears angled toward the group of young Thakari, with the focused attention that meant he was processing their emotional states. But the most important thing he detects isn't dishonesty, it's fear. Most diplomatic conflicts stem from species being afraid to reveal their real vulnerabilities. The young Thakari's scales shifted to a deeper green that Catherine recognized as serious contemplation. And when vulnerabilities are revealed, then species can discover that their problems often have collaborative solutions, Catherine replied. "But that requires trust, and trust requires the courage to be honest about what you actually need, instead of what you think you should demand." A new alert from the station's communication system indicated the arrival of another delegation, and Catherine turned to see Warsinger Nexus approaching with several Zeridian diplomatic specialists. Her wing membranes were set in the configuration that Catherine had learned indicated formal respect combined with genuine friendship. "Dr. Blackwood," Nexus said, her harmonic undertones carrying the warm resonance of gratitude. The Zeridian Commonwealth also requests observer status for future negotiations. Our sonic mining operations in the Helios system have exceeded all efficiency projections due to harmonic coordination with Corvani reproductive cycles. Catherine felt a surge of satisfaction as she realized how completely the three species had embraced collaborative possibilities. Warsinger Nexus, you're always welcome to observe. But I'm curious, how has the experience of working with the Corvani affected Zeridian understanding of interspecies cooperation? Nexus's wing membranes fluttered with what Catherine recognized as enthusiasm. We have discovered that harmonic resonance, the foundation of Zeridian communication, can be enhanced through interaction with other species communication methods. Working with Corvani crystalline harmonics and Thackeray chemical pheromone patterns has expanded our own communicative capabilities. Ranger's attention shifted again, and Catherine followed his gaze to see Representative Quill approaching with several other Corvani, whose luminescence patterns suggested they were specialists in reproductive biology and harmonic engineering. Dr. Blackwood, Quill said, their crystalline body glowing with the warm gold that Catherine had learned indicated deep gratitude. The Corvani Collective wishes to express formal appreciation for the communication breakthrough that preserved our species' reproductive future. Catherine felt Ranger's calm satisfaction as the dire wolf surveyed the gathering of representatives from all three species. His enhanced senses were processing the complex web of positive emotional states that filled the observation deck of gratitude, curiosity, hope, and genuine friendship between species who had been preparing for war just months earlier. Representative Quill, Catherine said, I'm grateful that the Corvani were willing to trust us with such crucial information about your reproductive needs. That level of honesty made everything else possible. Quill's luminescence brightened further. We have learned that concealing existential vulnerabilities often creates greater dangers than revealing them to trustworthy allies. Catherine looked around at the assembled representatives from three species, then down at Ranger, whose calm attention suggested that he was content with the emotional harmony he was detecting from all present. I think, Catherine said slowly, that we've discovered something important about the nature of diplomacy itself. Formal protocols are designed to protect positions of strength, but real solutions often require acknowledging positions of vulnerability. She gestured toward the holographic display showing the Helios system, where ships from three species work together in patterns of unprecedented cooperation. When species can trust each other with their genuine fears and needs, they often discover that their problems have collaborative solutions that benefit everyone. Ambassador Torres approached from the command center with another data tablet, his expression showing a mixture of excitement and concern. Dr. Blackwood, we've received formal requests for diplomatic intervention from 12 additional species conflicts. The success of the Helios Accords has made your methods highly sought after. Catherine felt a moment of overwhelming responsibility. But then Ranger's calm presence reminded her that she wasn't facing these challenges alone. The dire wolf's enhanced senses and pack-oriented psychology had been crucial to every breakthrough they'd achieved. Ambassador Torres, Catherine said with growing confidence, I think it's time to establish a new approach to interspecies diplomacy. Instead of treating conflicts as zero-sum competitions, what if we developed methods specifically designed to identify collaborative opportunities? She looked around at the assembled representatives from the three species, whose cooperation had become a model for the entire galactic community. The Helios Accords proved that species in conflict often have compatible needs that become apparent when honest communication replaces formal positioning. Torres nodded thoughtfully. You're proposing a fundamental shift in diplomatic methodology. Not just methodology, Catherine replied, reaching down to rest her hand on Ranger's massive shoulder. A fundamental shift in understanding what communication actually means between different species. Ranger's amber eyes were focused on the holographic display of the Helios system, and Catherine followed his gaze to watch the complex dance of ships from 3 civilizations working together to create something none of them could have achieved alone. Perfect translation technology can convey precise meanings, Catherine said, but it can't convey emotional truth. Sometimes the most important diplomatic breakthroughs happen when species trust each other enough to be honest about their fears and vulnerabilities. The gathering of representatives from 3 species began discussing possibilities for expanded cooperation, their voices creating a complex harmony of translated languages that somehow conveyed understanding despite the imperfect technology. Catherine smiled as she realized that Ranger had taught her something profound about the nature of communication itself. Sometimes, the most important messages weren't carried by words at all, but by the courage to trust another being with genuine truth. The dire wolf's calm presence had shown 3 warring species that vulnerability could become strength when met with honest cooperation. It was a lesson that would reshape interspecies diplomacy across the galaxy, one honest conversation at a time.